I guess should I try the hand raising thing? This works in class sometimes. Everyone put their hand up. I got one person out there, so I can kind of see everyone a little bit. So is everyone finding their seats? Yes, we're good. All right, well, hello and welcome to the UCCS Economic Forum. My name is Joe Craig. I'm the interim director of the UCCS Economic Forum, which is a little weird because we also have a full-time director. So, Tommy, I'm going to have to talk to you about a new title one of these days. What do you guys think? Assistant director? How about assistant to the director? Is that a little better? Anyway, so at any rate, thank you everyone for coming here. So I have a few thanks to say up front. So the first thank you is to my lovely partner Beth and my three girls, Smalls, Magic, and Relbel. This last year I've kind of been doing triple duty, being the director, being the chair of my department, and also being a full-time faculty member. And sometimes it meant they had to deal with me being home late, being gone early, and things like that. So thank you so much. Second big thank you I want to throw out to is our team. So Cassie, Julia, Gary Allen, you guys are amazing. Also, obviously, Tommy and Bill, that's our team. I just want to thank everyone for pulling this event together. It's fantastic. Okay, so thanks. Hey. So it's my pleasure, too, to introduce our Dean, Tommy Aker. So I got to tell you a little bit about Tommy to begin with. So you guys can see that I'm dressed very nicely today. What you guys may not know, because you've only ever seen me in the three-piece suit, is that oftentimes I like to wear pants and sandals. Now, Tommy has a real problem with this, okay? And he has mentioned it to me no less than 10 times. Why would you wear sandals? You're wearing pants. It should be shoes. If you're wearing sandals, it should be shorts. So that's a little anecdote about Tommy. Now, Tommy came to UCCS in 2018. For those of you that don't know, he actually gave up tenure to come here. That's usually like the #1 cardinal sin. You don't do that in academia, but he did it, and 5 years later, he's our full-time dean. Now, I came in as the interim director a year ago. He was also the interim dean. That meant we were both dual interims trying to pull this whole thing together, and we still managed to pull it off, which is pretty fantastic. He and I disagree on some things. Which football's better, football or football? Actually, he might actually agree with me on football being a little better. We'll see about that. I'll talk to him afterwards, see if he still likes me. At any rate, he's been a blessing to our university and to the college. So one thing I can tell you about Tommy, you all know he loves running. Everyone I think I'm introducing today has run a marathon as well, although Tommy's definitely ran the most. How many states are you up to, 25? 27, sorry, I was a little low ball on that one, sorry guys. At any rate, so he got me 27 from backstage. The thing I want you to know the most about Tommy though is, I've met a lot of people who tell me that they care about students, care about developing humans. I've never met a person who means it more than he does. So when he says he's about creating a community, he's about empowering people to do the best that they possibly can, he really means it. And he has backed it up by supporting me, supporting the forum, supporting our team. It's been absolutely amazing. So, with that, please welcome our dean, Tommy. How'd you do it? Love you, man.
So ridiculous. I didn't know I was going to get that kind of introduction, so thank you, Joe. Hello and welcome to the UCCS Economic Forum. We're excited to host the 27th annual forum today. The success of this event over the past 27 years is the direct result of active partnership and participation year after year from our business community. Thank you for your ongoing support. I'd also like to offer a special thank you to our forum founders, Dr. Tom Zwerlein, Dr. Jeff Ferguson, and Ron Chernak, for their vision and effort in making the local economic forum possible, and for the leadership of Dr. Tatiana Bailey, who served as the forum director from 2014 to 2022 and continuing the legacy of those founders. This year marks a pivotal year for the forum. We've added new initiatives, new leadership, a new format to this year's event that you'll get to experience firsthand. I'd like to make a special welcome as well to our new director, Dr. Bill Craighead. He started in August of this year and will take over the full forum activities and duties after the forum is complete this year. We're thrilled to have Bill on board. And you'll hear from him later today as he addresses you on the Southern Colorado Economic Outlook. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bill Craighead to the forum. I'd also like to thank Dr. Joe Craighead, the character you just saw on stage. Joe has served as interim director for the past year, and in working with him over that time, it has really been truly an honor. He has helped us from the beginning of day one as interim and continues to put in so much effort and energy and time into the forum as we move forward. His work on the snapshots, the monthly dashboards, partner breakfasts, the presentations he has given, the details about this year's event that he's continued to work on are all very fulfilling and has made this forum a much better event. In addition to all of that, he is also an economics professor. He chairs his department. He mentioned his 3 kids. He's got a lot going on. So for the fact that he gave us so much time, effort, and energy for the forum, it's truly an honor to have him with us. So please join me in thanking Joe for his tremendous work. Since 1997, the UCCS Economic Forum has been just one example of how the College of Business partners with the community. Our mission is to prioritize and empower learners at every stage of their educational journey, develop innovative research that contributes to scientific discovery and effective business practice, and serve as a hub for our community in productive discourse, practical learning, and social responsibility. The Economic Forum has been providing targeted economic information to drive both business and government decisions for the greater Colorado Springs for nearly 3 decades. Our academic programs aim to produce students to serve your workforce needs. We have a successful history of working side by side to build the strength of the college, our region, and we look forward to identifying new, innovative ways to support our local workforce in the years to come and provide amazing opportunities for our students as they become graduates. As we all know, for the last couple of years, forecasting the next year or even the next few months is very challenging. That is why we look to our experts to provide insights into our economic future. We look forward to hearing from our next keynote speaker, Eve Lieberman, Executive Director of the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, as well as the topical conversations in our breakout sessions about the CHIPS Act and affordable housing. Our final speaker of the day will be Dr. Bill Craighead with his Southern Colorado Economic Outlook, before connecting in our networking reception with refreshments and drinks supplied by our great partners, Goat Patch and Distillery 291. I'd also like to thank our platinum partner, Ent Credit Union, and also apologize to Ent Credit Union for our mistakes in the miscapitalization of their name. A mistake we will make sure never happens again. I'd also like to thank our gold partner, Pikes Peak Workforce Center, and our media partners, KOAA, News 5, The Gazette, and iHeartRadio. We also wish to thank our nearly 50 silver and sustaining level partners. Not only do our partners support the forum financially, but they also provide their expertise and use their business connections to help bring you an outstanding program. I also lastly want to thank our event partners. Today's event is actually free, and that is made possible in part by the following organizations: Armis, Colorado Springs Airport, Chris Franquemont Guaranteed Rate, Minutemen Press, MBH Bank, and SHI International. We are grateful for the opportunity to host you for the 27th edition of the UCCS Economic Forum. We look ahead towards a very bright future in Colorado Springs. And before I move on to the last part of this, I also want to thank our team for the amazing event that they've put together for you today. Your attendance is in recognition and of their hard work and everything they did to make this event a successful event. With that, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's presentations. I'd now like to invite Colorado Springs Mayor Yemi to the stage for a few remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon. To the many leaders in the House, I see you, and I first want to thank you for your contribution and your leadership to our great city. I need you, and let's keep this momentum going. It is with distinct honor and privilege to stand before you to help kick off the University of Colorado Springs Economic Forum, a gathering that signifies the importance of collaboration and innovation in shaping the economic future of our city. A warm welcome to all of you, including the distinguished experts, community leaders, and esteemed guests who have joined us for this crucial conversation. The UCCS Economic Forum, it's not just an event, it's a platform where we come together as a community to learn and strategize about the economic opportunities and challenges that lie ahead of us. You see, in today's rapidly changing world, where our economic landscape is constantly evolving, it is essential that we stay informed, adaptable, and forward-thinking. The insights shared in this forum will help us navigate the complexities of our economic environment, workforce needs, innovation, and sustainability, and equip us to make decisions that will impact our city's prosperity for years to come. As mayor, I've hit the ground running, setting an ambitious 100-day blueprint with symbolic 42 items as a nod to being the 42nd mayor of Colorado Springs. The blueprint is framed around 3 priorities. Priority number 1, to build support within government. Priority number 2, build trust within the community. Priority number 3, address our most pressing issues. The good news is that we have made a considerable amount of progress. And 1 week from today, at my first State of the City address, which, by the way, would be my 100th day in office, I will recap what we've achieved in this short amount of time and offer a look at what is next. Economic vitality has been and will continue to be a key part of my administration's focus. Not only because I've been a business leader and economic developer, but a vibrant economy is critical for both job creation and talent development. And together, we must work to ensure that Colorado Springs remains a business-friendly city, including our amazing small businesses. So, in conclusion, let us approach this economic forum with an open mind, a collaborative spirit, and a commitment to innovation. Together, we will explore ideas, share insights, and lay the foundation for an economically prosperous and vibrant Colorado Springs on a hill that shines brightly. Friends, I truly believe that greater things are yet to come and greater things are still to be done in this city. Thank you again for your dedication to the city and your participation in this important conversation. Let the discussions begin. Thank you.
All right, guys, so I'm the one back out here. So before I get going, I did promise my daughters I would do this, so I apologize in advance. If you've seen Ted Lasso, we're going to take an Ussie because it's us. It's not just me. So there we go. Everyone smile. There we go. Okay, thank you, guys. Anyway, all right, so also, how's my hair looking right now? Is it still holding together? I did also steal hairspray from my daughters this morning. So I was running around this morning while I was trying to get them out the door. 2 different schools, 2 different start times, trying to get them all off while their mom was at work. So that was a fun morning for me this morning. At any rate, our next speaker up is Eve Lieberman. Now, I'm trying to do a little more personal introduction instead of reading just people's bios. That being said, I knew everyone else I was introducing today for the last 5 to 7 years. I met Eve this morning. So the first thing I noticed is that she's a Michigan alum. That's unfortunate. Oh, there's some applause. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, I am a Columbus native, so I started going to football games with my dad when I was 3. So I have a hatred for that team up north. I refuse to use the letter M during the month of November. I actually have a shirt that has it crossed out. My daughter's always asking me about that. I can't really say much right now because Michigan is whooping our butt currently, but hopefully we turn that around this year. That being said, we still do use the confidence index from the University of Michigan, so we're not too proud to use them as well in the forum. What I did find out, though, is that Eve has 2 kids. I asked her what her hobby was, and she said, my kids. And I'm like, I get that. Okay, so that does make sense to me. She also does love being outdoors, but who in Colorado doesn't? What was really cool was I learned from her that she ran the Marine Corps Marathon. And she ran it, I think, 2 years after I ran it. So I've run one and only one marathon. And we bonded over the experience because if you've never run the Marine Corps Marathon, it's mostly flat, to be honest. And then you finish coming up into Arlington Cemetery, and it's this huge uphill right when you finish, right? And so, you're running up there, everyone's cramping, my calf was falling apart, but there are Marines on the side going, you got this, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't walk here, So if they're cheering you on, and she had the same experience, feeling like you're gonna die at the end, but managing to get uphill. The other thing she's most proud about is the full-day kindergarten program that she helped get through, that both her kids are gonna have the opportunity to take advantage of. So, without further ado, please welcome Eve Lieberman. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for UCCS for having me here today to discuss the economic vitality and growth of this critical region to the state. There are so many assets here on campus. I got to tour a little bit before I started here, and I got to see the Cybersecurity Center that's co-located with the National Cybersecurity Center and the Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center, the Lane Center for Academic Health and Sciences, and the Microelectronics Research Lab, among many others. Clearly, UCCS is pushing the envelope in cyber, health tech, semiconductors, and advanced industry, and it's so exciting to see the growth of the university and to be here today. As many of you know, I work for the Office of Economic Development and International Trade to advance the state's economy through financial programs, training, educational support across all industries, across all of Colorado. Our mission is to empower all to thrive in Colorado's economy, and we want to protect what makes our state so great: to live, work, start a business, raise a family, retire, and make it accessible to everyone. Our staff works across many different divisions to support all aspects of economic development in any stage of business, including job growth incentives that have helped recruit businesses to Colorado Springs and El Paso County, funding mechanisms that have supported new developments like the City for Champions, and small business support through the Small Business Development Center Network, which is hosted by the Colorado Springs Chamber and Economic Development Corporation. Through that work, we have formed many lasting relationships with Colorado Springs community. Each of these partners has helped the state understand the local vision for a thriving economy and community and enabled us to create better and more effective support. One thing has been very clear about Colorado Springs: it is getting noticed. In recent years, Forbes and the U.S. News & World Report have named it one of the best places to live in Colorado. TripAdvisor has called Colorado Springs one of the world's top 25 emerging destinations, and it made the New York Times annual list of 52 places to go. Most recently, Smart Assets ranked Colorado Springs 9th of 200 U.S. cities for where Black Americans fare best economically. Since December of last year, our office has had the pleasure of working with Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC to announce 7 different companies in the advanced industries that have chosen Colorado Springs for expansion. This is including 4 companies that serve aerospace and defense industry. Caliola is a 100% women-owned communications technology firm, and Nooks is a classified space-as-service company that offers flexible access to classified facilities and associated networks for use by industry and government partners to increase the pace of innovation and technology adoption within the nation's defense sector. Integris, a global supplier of advanced materials and process solutions for the semiconductor, life sciences, and other high-tech industries. and Meyer Burger, an industrial manufacturer of solar cells and solar modules that's headquartered in Switzerland, and they chose here, Colorado Springs, for expansion. These 7 companies recognize the many assets that the Springs has to offer: its top talent, a stable and collaborative ecosystem, and a nation-leading quality of life. Collectively, they are projected to create over 2,300 good-paying jobs. And they demonstrate that Colorado Springs is on the map, not just nationally, but internationally, as we see clean tech companies like Meyer Burger choose U.S. production with support from federal and state incentives. These are not just the success stories of Colorado Springs. We can't talk about this vibrant city without applauding the recent decision to permanently base U.S. Space Command in Colorado Springs. This decision, as we know, was based in the best interest of our national security, and Space Command is part of a wider nation-leading aerospace and defense industry that already exists and is strong growth in Colorado, and Colorado Springs specifically will play an important role in supporting this continued growth. On the way here, I drove past the U.S. Air Force Academy Visitor Center under construction, the 5th and final City for Champions venue, where developers are planning to turn over the Visitor Center building to the Academy in May and open the hotel in November of '24. Last year, OEdit staff had the opportunity to visit a number of the City for Champions projects, and they toured the site just as construction was beginning. They also visited the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, Widener Field, Ed Robson Arena, and the William J. Hubble Sports Medicine and Performance Center, which were also made possible by the state's Regional Tourism Act, or called RTA, which was passed in 2009 to help restore economies after the 2008 Great Recession. Already, we are seeing the economic impact of these venues as they bring out-of-town guests and out-of-state visitors to Colorado Springs. The Ed Robson Arena has hosted the World Jump Roping Championship, the U.S. Open Taekwondo Hanmedang, and the USA Weightlifting Championship, which brought in over 4,000 athletes from around the world. These athletes travel with friends and family and shop locally and stay in those Colorado Springs hotels, and they contribute to the strong local economy that exists here. In addition to the City of Champions projects, our staff has toured the Neuros Penrose Event Center recently, and we saw the renovations at the Indoor Event Center, which are just thrilling and show the center's commitment to preserve the Western heritage and its potential to drive tourism and economic growth in the region. We know these economic wins are the result of hard work and persistence by the local community and the state. Following the Great Recession, recovery in Colorado Springs lagged behind the state and the nation. Local leaders had to make tough decisions about what programs and services to maintain, and some young people left the community. Community, government, and business leaders coalesced. They recognized the need to reverse those trends and spark economic growth and opportunity, and we are seeing the unmistakable result of those collective efforts here now today. As the governor said in his regional State of the State earlier this year, the state of Colorado cannot succeed unless Colorado Springs succeeds. And we all have a role to play to ensuring the success of this region. We have been proud to support Colorado Springs and partner throughout this revitalization process. In addition to the Regional Tourism Act funding that supported the development of the City of Champions projects, there are also enormous state incentives that help secure Caliola, Integris, Meyer Burger, and other company expansions that I discussed earlier. They help secure BlueStack for expansion. This company launched in 2018 to bring organizations a new solution for securely storing, managing, and securing data, and creating services capable of helping medical professionals better coordinate patient care while complying with privacy laws, law enforcement, and protecting personally identifiable information. These state incentives are hallmarks of Colorado's economic development programs. They offer performance-based incentives that are tied to job creation and salary requirements. And as you can see from the slide, these incentives have been put to good use in El Paso County during the last year. While we know that companies choose Colorado and Colorado Springs for our top talent, our nation-leading quality of life, and collaborative ecosystem, these incentives also offer a powerful recruitment tool, particularly when they're paired with local incentives. Partners like the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC, under the leadership of Jana Reeder-Kleinmeyer and the City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County, and Colorado Springs Utilities, come together regularly to support company expansions like the ones I mentioned in this area. And we have seen the difference that it makes. In particular, the Colorado Springs EDC Deal Closing Fund and the Chamber and the incentives offered by the City of Colorado Springs are enormously powerful tools. The city has found unique ways to offer relief through the business personal property tax, and that supports the purchase of important assets like machinery and equipment, construction materials, which make a difference for expanding companies. It has also been an excellent partner in helping implement the Enterprise Zone program, which was passed by the Colorado legislature to encourage development in economically distressed areas across the state. This year, we are also excited to announce a new resource to support businesses in Southern Colorado, a venture capital authority to partner with Colorado One Fund, and they specialize in aerospace and defense industry. They have an ability to serve Southern Colorado, urban enterprise zones, and BIPOC women and veteran-owned businesses. This partnership is one of the VCA's largest investments, and it's first in a fund based solely in Southern Colorado. The VCA will contribute up to $17 million to catalyze the fund and attract private investors. Through this work, we have seen that the future is bright for Colorado Springs. But we also recognize that we have work to do to help the state and this vibrant city stay nationally and globally competitive. We're beginning to face headwinds in two critical areas. Colorado, as we know, has an unparalleled quality of life. But the life that was once given, affordable living once helped us attract and retain top talent. We now have to compete to keep the workforce in Colorado and help the workers develop the skills they need to access high-paying, in-demand jobs. Ensuring workers can live close to where they work and provide affordable housing and workforce housing is a key piece of remaining competitive and maintaining that quality of life for Coloradans. That's why OEDIT's work is evolving to focus on economic competitiveness programs, including workforce programs and affordable housing. At OEDIT, we are expanding our focus on affordable housing by joining partners in the Division of Local Government within the Division of Housing and the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, or CHAFA, to help address Colorado's housing shortage, using both traditional and innovative financial tools. We have Hillary Cooper, the former county commissioner, as the director of innovative housing for programs at OEDIT. And we house 3 programs now to expand the supply of both affordable and attainable housing across Colorado. Proposition 123, which was passed by the voters in 2022, created the State Affordable Housing Fund. OEDIT manages 60% of that fund and is working with CHAFA to create 3 different programs: land banking, concessionary debt, and equity programs to support the development of low and middle income and multifamily rental units. This year, Prop 123 will generate $96 million in funding for these programs. And we anticipate that the next year we'll have $200 million. Interest is high in these programs. While the concessionary debt and equity programs will be launched later this year, when we launched the land banking program, we received 113 applications, requesting $256 million of an available $23.5 million. Given this available funding, we know that there will be increased demand over time, and I am pleased to share that Colorado Springs has opted in and has demonstrated their commitment to increasing affordable housing and expediting its approval as required by Prop 123. Now your community will be able to access those resources to improve access to affordable and attainable housing. And it's joining the state in our commitment to provide more housing for every budget. We also have a housing program in OEDIT called the Middle Income Housing Authority, which is an independent special authority that offers tax-free bonds for middle-income affordable housing. The Middle Income Housing Authority, or MIHA, is currently working with 6 housing projects across the state to prepare for underwriting. And the Innovative Housing Incentive Program, or IHIP, provides working capital grants and factory development loans to manufacturers of innovative housing, like modular housing or kit homes. By supporting Colorado's innovative housing manufacturers, we are working to create new jobs and new homes across Colorado. OEDIT has awarded 6 different recipients of innovative housing manufacturers across the state. That will incentivize the creation of 1,500 affordable and attainable housing units across Colorado and contribute to the recipients' work to create more than 4,500 units over the next 3 years. 2 of these grants in particular have gone to Southern Colorado businesses, including StructureBot in Colorado Springs, a startup that offers 3D concrete printing and other robotics functions to support housing development. So they build robots and build houses for use by general contractors and other companies. StructureBot is also starting to build homes directly and begin a pilot project with the city of Colorado Springs this summer. In partnership with CHAFA, we've also launched the factory development loan component of IHIP. That's a $20 million revolving loan fund available to support the development of new manufacturing facilities, of innovative housing, or the expansion of existing facilities. OEDIT Senior Program Manager Jack Thibaut will be speaking on this topic later today as part of the housing panel, and I encourage you to hear him and ask any questions and learn more about this exciting new program. Overall, we are thrilled to see this burgeoning industry in Colorado, and we are helping to do our part to create more affordable and attainable housing for Colorado's exceptional workforce and creating stable year-round jobs. We're also expanding our involvement in workforce development. OEDIT has long understood the importance of a talent pipeline and maintaining that unmatched talent pool. Skills Advance Colorado is a program at OEDIT that helps businesses and nonprofits create customized job trainings for employees so businesses can remain competitive and workers can build transferable skills. As companies like Caliola, Nooks, Integris, Meyer Burger, they choose Colorado and Colorado Springs for expansion, we need to make sure they have the talent able to fill those jobs. As a state, we now have over 2 jobs for every unemployed person. We are aware that Colorado will leave talent behind if we don't help Coloradans get the skills they need. Right now, there are 600,000 adults with some college, no degree, and 200,000 without a high school diploma. When these individuals have the opportunity to maximize their impact, they can become an important part of Colorado's workforce today and tomorrow and help us retain our top talent in the nation. As a state, we are making targeted investments in workforce talent pipelines to support in-demand industries by region and foster new pathways to high-paying jobs. Governor Polis and OEDIT were pleased to announce the first of 3 funding phases for Opportunity Now, a program that will invest over $85 million in workforce development. Recipients are now starting or expanding partnerships between industry and educational institutions and support the development of skills that are needed now and in the future. 18 of these grant recipients serve the Pikes Peak region, including Pike Peak's Bozies, Pike Peak State College, and Zavaro, an information technology company that specializes in serving government and national defense partners and announced its expansion in Colorado Springs in December of last year. Zavaro was the first company to benefit from Colorado Springs Deal Closing Fund, and the EDC also approved state incentives to support the expansion. Using an Opportunity Now grant, Zavaro plans to work with Ellicott High School to develop a scalable model for high school students to access technical training in cybersecurity, particularly in rural areas. We are thrilled to see companies like Zavaro take an active role in workforce development, because these actions have a proven return on ROI and are an important first step to keep our workforce strong. Finally, OEdit has a strategic data-driven goal to help develop sustainable long-term infrastructure to drive the advanced industries. This is an important part of this community, and we're focusing on areas like clean tech and renewable energy, advanced manufacturing, life sciences, aerospace, and defense. We have a strong software as a service and fintech sectors, along with ag tech, robotics, and automation. Our goal is to leverage the federal funding to advance these strategic priorities, and the CHIPS and Science Act is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do just that. Colorado is integral as part of the national and global semiconductor supply chain, and Colorado Springs is one of the densest regions in the country. It has a strong concentration of semiconductor R&D, design, and manufacturing. Many world-renowned semiconductor companies have operations here, and many lesser players whose products and processes are essential to the global supply chain also are in Colorado Springs. The spirit of collaboration is evident and has led to partnerships between industry leaders and research institutions across the segments of the value chain, which continue to push this fundamental technology forward. The city is home to InnovaFlex Foundry, which is the only full-size flat panel semiconductor foundry outside of Asia, and Microchip, which recently announced its $800 million expansion on a 50-acre campus where about 1,000 workers produce a range of devices, including 8-bit microcontrollers, high-power silicon carbide devices, and radiation-hardened devices. And Integris, a supplier of advanced materials and process solutions for the semiconductor and other high-technology industries, is doubling its presence in Colorado Springs with the establishment of a new manufacturing center of excellence. Because of these factors and industry leaders, as I mentioned, we know the state and the city are primed for growth, and we're working to ensure this happens. Last year, we stood up a CHIPS task force on which those 3 industry partners are participating, and we've been really fortunate to have these partnerships and continue to demonstrate the strength of the Colorado region in the semiconductor space. And we're grateful for their leadership on other areas too, like workforce and talent development and childcare. Earlier this year, we passed a bill to expand state incentives to make them more accessible for companies in the semiconductor space. We are working on other programs and projects that include expediting air permitting, workforce development, and childcare and infrastructure to help this industry. And this year, we hired Colorado's semiconductor industry manager, Dan Silvetti, who's here today, and he's part of the CHIPS panel. That will help organizations navigate these opportunities and the challenges of applying for this federal funding. I urge you to also connect with Dan today, and he's here to support your plans and this industry growth. This is just the beginning. We continue to expand and find ways to support this industry because we know it will bring investment, good-paying jobs, and prosperity to the region and the state as a whole. So, as we consider the many economic wins that exist in Colorado Springs and this region, we can say this community has achieved an incredible transformation. In many ways, we see a model for economic growth in this region. Business leaders have stepped up in partnership with local and state government partners, and they developed a vision for the future and making investments in the community. And I know I speak for the OEdit staff who've joined me here today that we are grateful for the opportunity to form and strengthen the partnerships that exist here and that many important conversations that will take place during this summit. These strong partnerships, including the ones with our industry partners, will create strong forward momentum in this region. And we will capture the new opportunities before us and ensure that workers have the skills to access good-paying jobs and can afford to live near where they work. As we do, we will make Colorado and Colorado Springs more competitive nationally and around the globe. I look forward to Colorado Springs' future successes and celebrating many milestones together for years to come. And now I will invite Diane Derby from News 5 up for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for having me here today. Thrilled to be here on behalf of News 5. I do have some questions for you, Eve, so hopefully you'll indulge me on that. We heard you talk about affordable housing, and it's something we talk about so much on News 5, one of the greatest concerns that we hear from viewers. What is the soonest neighbors here can really expect to feel like it's finally affordable? I know you said 2 to 3 years out, but is it that long?
It's a good question. I think the land banking program, as I said, it just launched. So we are, going through the process of the application. So that will probably take another year or two to see the value of the benefits of that program. The other 2 programs that OEDIT has, as I said, concessionary debt and equity programs will be, follow on that. So I do think it'll be at least another 1.5 to 2 years before you see any growth in more housing units from the programs that OEDIT operates.
And I know there's a lot of realtors in the audience. I recognize some of you. Many of my friends here today concerned about the interest rates, concerned about the prices of homes and how difficult it is for them right now. Is there anything you can say that will encourage them as they pursue their business interests?
Well, I think that the Innovative Housing Program, and again, Jack is going to speak on this panel, so I don't want to take away anything that he's going to add on this in this respect, but has already been catalyzing a lot of growth in the modular and manufactured 3D printing industry. And so you'll see a lot of different types of affordable housing. There's already many companies around the state that are offering this, and we're trying to accelerate that growth with the $40 million grant program, operating capital, and the concessionary loan part of that program. So we will see some growth in that area in particular, and they can make really high quality houses that are both affordable and attainable across Colorado.
I love to be the one asking questions, but I failed to mention I will take 3 questions. If you want to come to this side of the stage and stand here, we'll be happy to ask your questions of Leave. I combined your first and last name of Eva as well. Another question we have is, if industry partners are interested in taking more of a leadership role in workforce development, what should they do?
Yeah, as I said, it's a top issue of competitiveness and a challenge for employers to find the right talent. And we know from the U.S. World and News Report, we have the 3rd most highly skilled workforce in the entire country. So we're already doing well, but in order to maintain our competitive edge, that's why we're launching programs like Opportunity Now, talent development programs that require industry partnerships with academia and nonprofit partners to create innovative programs that benefit high in-demand jobs across regions. So we're really excited to see the innovations that come out of the applications through that program. We have $50 million left in that program, and I'm really excited to see the next generation of talent development models and training through that program.
One of the last questions I want to ask you is, we saw in one of your slides that El Paso County has greatly benefited from state job growth incentives that help recruit companies for expansion. So is there something specific that accounts for the regional success in recruiting companies? We know there's so much that's wonderful about coming here, but is there something specific?
Yeah, it's hard to name one specific thing, but I think the collaborative infrastructure that exists here, and as I talked about a little bit, but in terms of between industry and academia partners, in terms of the chamber's approach, and investing in the community is really important. Having that deal closing fund and critical to investing in companies to recruit and expand companies here. And I also think the business property tax relief, that is a unique program that does not exist across Colorado. So I think Colorado Springs has the advantage with those particular incentive programs, and the collaborative infrastructure that exists, and the high density of advanced industries that exist here, nation-leading universities, and other this area of high growth of diversification that exists.
Any questions from the audience? Raise your hand and I'll come to you. No questions? I'm the journalist. You do have a question. Can I ask you to come to the front, please? Okay, what is your name and what is your question?
Hi, my name is Luz Gonzalez, and my question is around technology and the startup ecosystem. So I've been speaking to people in Boulder, people in Denver, to really understand what do we need to do in Colorado Springs to get that spin wheel of innovation really going. We have UCCS, we have 3 accelerators, and we have talent, but it seems like there's some factors that are missing. So what are we doing, and what do we need to do more to really have Colorado Springs be a hub of technology and innovation?
It's a great question. I think already you're helping lead the way, and I think we want to help as a state at OEDIT to help all parts of Colorado succeed. And so that starts with one of our advanced industries grant program. There's 3 different programs that are offered within that, $30 million in non-dilutive capital. So encourage the connectivity between for startups to access that and to go through boot camps and accelerator programs that already exist here and take advantage of that, and then apply through. It's a very competitive program, but that is a source of capital that we're really excited about, and that has proven dividends. And we see a lot of companies go through Advanced Industries program, and then they're beneficiaries of job growth incentive programs, and they're expanding. So it's really exciting to see the ability for the state. That's one of our best tools to help startups generally. But I would say you guys are doing everything right. I think we're trying to work on, bringing more capital here. We have a lot of, angel investor type capital, but I think that's something more that we can work on and talk more about, expanding the reach of different venture capital and other sources of equity funds and financing programs for startups to succeed and thrive.
Okay, anyone else? Hello, sir. Just say your name and your question.
Yes, my name's Dave Lord, and seems we're sitting here in a performing arts center, and obviously another valuable resource in our community is sort of the creative industry, artists, entertainers, film, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the work you're doing to advance the creative industries here locally and in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we have both one of the divisions that's under the Office of Economic Development is the Creative Industries Division. That accounts for 100,000 jobs and is one of the leading contributors to the economy. So, and it's really exciting to see kind of the community investment when you have a creative economy that does well, then you see kind of the carry-on investment by retail and other businesses, the tourism attraction. So it's an integral part of the community, as well as the film office too is another division that we work very closely with that offers incentives to bring films here in Colorado. And I think the programs that I'm most excited about are tied integrally to placemaking and to affordable housing connectivity. So we have a Space to Create program that creates more workforce housing for artists and for other users, other community benefits. And when you have that type of space, then you can see kind of the additional benefits with kind of revitalizing different communities. That's happened in Southern Colorado and Trinidad, for example. And we've seen a lot of growth in areas across rural Colorado in particular that have benefited from that program and for just becoming a creative district in general, which we do a certification and we provide training and support through programming. So excellent question, very important contributor to Colorado's economy, and we are very invested in helping to do that placemaking across the state so that all communities in Colorado can thrive.
Anyone else? Last one. Okay, sir, in the front. You can. Because we're also live streaming this, so I'd like people to be able to hear you. Yes, you will see all of the back of your heads on TV. I will say before he comes to the stage that News 5 is sharing a very important special tonight on the economy. It's airing after the game, so we hope you'll be watching. Okay, sir, just say your name and your questions, please.
Greg Phillips, the Colorado Springs Airport. So Eve, great to see you and exciting to see the programs that you have here. So the community over the last few years has seen so much, has support and offered so much support to the growth that we've seen at the airport, which supports the businesses you talk about, supports tourism here. What support can the community expect potentially from OEDIT to support this and continue the momentum and the growth we see at the Colorado Springs Airport? Sorry, as a parochial question, I guess, but appreciate your input.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recognize that the regional airports are a huge contributor to the diversifying the economy and making it as strong as it can, from bringing in tourists who ultimately combine kind of business tours along with their tourism, and then they choose to relocate and expand in Colorado because they're coming here just because of tourism. So we are very, very committed to helping regional airports in particular, and I know there's a lot of projects that you guys are ready for expansion and ready to grow, and so we are thinking creatively about different financing tools that could be used to expand that growth. So more to come, but we're very committed to that, and that there are many airports across this state, but I know you guys are definitely at the top of the list in terms of ready and for expansion and growth in the near term. So it's very exciting to see all that you've been able to do. Thank you.
Looking forward to those renovations. We talked about that last night on News 5. Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you all so much for letting me participate in this question and answer session. Eve Lieberman, thank you so much for being here today. A round of applause.
Welcome, everybody, to the panel on housing affordability. We're going to go ahead and get started, so I'll ask you to take your seats. My name is Dustin Bloom. I am a professor of leadership in the UCCS College of Business and also serving as an associate dean. I am very pleased to be moderating this panel. If you've had a chance to read the bios, you're already well aware that we have a wealth of knowledge about housing and housing affordability here on the stage with us. I'll just go down from closest to me to the end there. First, we have Jim Harris. He is the Senior Vice President of Corporate and Commercial Banking at U.S. Bank. Jim, if you've been a part of this event, this economic forum, you probably know Jim. He has been on the steering committee for 15 years, helping this event become what it is today, and has nearly 40 years of experience in banking and offers a unique perspective from that. Next to Jim, we have Jack Tebow. Jack was mentioned several times in Eve Lieberman's presentation. He is a senior program manager at OEDIT, which is the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Jack manages the Innovative Housing Incentive Program, IHIP, which we heard a little bit about and we're excited to hear more about in this panel. Next to him is Pastor Ben Anderson, who is the Executive Director of the Solid Rock Community Development Corporation. He's also a senior pastor at Solid Rock Christian Center. The Community Development Corporation was named Nonprofit Community Organization of the Year in 2022 by the Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce. And next to Pastor Ben, we have, last but not least, Lee Patke. He is the Executive Director for 13 years now at Grescio Housing, which is focused on affordable housing here in Colorado. 30 years in corporate and nonprofit settings with work in workforce readiness and housing and program development. He was also a founding member of Leadership Council of Pikes Peak Housing Network and served for 6 years on the board of directors of Housing Colorado. So overall, my goal today is to ask some questions that promote good conversation. Ultimately, we want to hear what your questions are, what your concerns are. We're putting up a giant QR code soon, so you can send in your questions. I'll receive them here on the iPad, and we can mix those in as well. But I'd like to start with just an open question, not necessarily targeted at any of you. You're all welcome to chime in on this. The question: how would you assess the current state of housing affordability in the southern Colorado region? And are there any specific factors driving the affordability challenges that we're currently facing?
I'll go ahead and go
Jim.
first. I feel like I'm testifying in front of Congress, by the way. I don't know, that's what the feeling, so please be nice. But really our affordable housing issue has really been developing over decades. We're really severely underbuilt in our amount of housing, and this is really the root cause of our affordable housing crisis. It means that we need to be okay with density in our city. We need to be okay with building more housing, more infill projects, and we need to be able to speed up that development. We need faster building approvals. We need to create, like it was talked about earlier, more technologies to build faster and better housing. And of course, we need better interest rates, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later in our discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, Ben Anderson, I think also one of the factors that causes the cost of housing to rise is construction costs. And when the construction costs at the beginning, you have a certain budget, and then by the end of the project, it has just increased. Those costs get passed along to the consumer. And so we have to find better ways of also mitigating construction costs in our city.
You know, going back to what Jim said about supply and demand, since 2011, each year since 2011, we've added more households to our community than we have new housing units. So simple supply and demand says cost of housing is going up. Price of materials, price of labor, cost of debt, all of that has increased. And then, of course, the last couple of years and the after effect of COVID, we've all watched that play out on the news. So it's been tough for anyone who's got a livable income, but especially tough on those folks in our service industry and tourism industry who, just by nature of the scale of their income, have less choice. Even if they're only paying a third of their income towards rent, by definition, that 2/3 that's left is a different scale than someone that's making $100,000 or $150,000, and it's been tough. We're happy to see that changing and growing, and hoping to get the momentum that has started to continue to grow, especially in affordable housing.
And I'll just add, in my role at the state, I'm hardly a local expert, so I won't go too deep, but in my previous role, before I started managing the Innovative Housing Program, I was managing the state's Opportunity Zone program, which is a federal program supported by the state. And my experience in that was just that developers from within Colorado and beyond were really drawn to Colorado Springs and the surrounding region, partially just because of the market dynamics, but also they found it just as much as it was kind of, the approval and permitting process was relatively fast compared to some other Mountain West urban areas. It was predictable, communication was clear, and they knew what to expect. And I think that went a really long way. And generally, I've found that between the city and the EDC, there's been a really impressive ability to leverage state and federal incentives and to really make the most of them. So I'll end on an optimistic note there.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we need some optimism in housing affordability right now. There are many points that you mentioned that we're going to tap into with some of these questions, but I'd like to focus on the first point about interest rates, Jim, and this question might be best answered by you first, and then the others are welcome to chime in. But I'm curious, how does the increase of interest rates impact both the mix of available housing and then overall housing affordability for the region?
Great, great. Well, wouldn't you know, they would ask the math question to the banker on the panel, so I guess that's appropriate. So let's start with the real life example. The median home price in El Paso County is $470,000. Current mortgage rates for a 30-year mortgage, 7.25%. That means the household will need to earn $104,000 a year to afford the average house. Rates when they were 3.5%, the same household would have needed to have earned only $74,000. Now let's take an example of two people earning minimum wage, and they would only be able to qualify for a $233,000 house. And I don't know about you, but there's not many. I know we have a lot of realtors out there. I don't think there's many $233,000 houses. So really, this increase, sudden increase in interest rates has also had some other distortions in the market. So I'm going to ask for, even though I can't see you because the lights are up here, but I'm going to ask for a raise of hands. if you have a mortgage rate, oh, there we go. If you have a mortgage rate 3.5% or less, raise your hand. Okay, keep your hands up. Wow. Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So now tell me, how many of you are considering moving from that house? Right? Oh, I think there's one. Realtors, look, right? Find those hands. People are effectively stuck in their homes. I mean, that's really what's going on by this rise and increase in interest rates. In a typical market, about 10% of the houses sold would be new homes, and 90% would be existing homes. Now it's about 30% of new homes are sold and 70% existing. So how are our builders responding to this? And I know there's several builders in the audience today. They're building smaller homes, about 10% less than since 2018. And part of these home builders are building part of the home off-site. And we're going to hear, I think, a little bit about some of the programs. I don't know if Brian Barr's in the audience today, but he's doing that in Pueblo, and that's reducing costs. But, it's really the mortgage rates that are still driving most of the cost for our payments and also for our home builders. So some other ways that we've seen some distortions in the market. People are starting to rent more apartments instead of buying homes. But luckily, we've had a nice increase in the number of apartments. In fact, in 2022, we had a record number of permits pulled, 4,963 units. And you can agree or disagree but our community does seem to be more open to more apartments being built inside the city, and our elected officials are supporting that. So I know a lot of us, I'm kind of that age, I have kids that I want to be able to move back to Colorado Springs, and without those apartments, we're not going to be able to do that. So I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is we have a lot of these high-paying jobs coming into Colorado Springs, and these people are going to need mortgages, and they are going to need houses. So I'll leave you kind of on an optimistic note again. Here's my advice. I've heard this from several realtors. Date the rate, marry the house, right? So you can always refinance later. So leave us on a positive note.
Wise advice.
Yeah.
Speaking of optimism, Ben, I'd like to direct this question toward you. I think it's a good fit. What do you see as the ongoing local initiatives that are encouraging the development of affordable housing units? And how can the public and private sectors collaborate to increase the availability of affordable housing options? And Lee, you might want to weigh in this as well.
Yeah, good question. And, when our organization first started as a developer and wanted to build affordable housing, which is multifamily housing apartments, by the way, we realized we did not have all the funding to, at least start the fees, the licensures, to get it off the ground. And so we really didn't have a lot of partners that were willing to fund a nonprofit who had a passion for housing, had the land, but didn't have the funds to get it off the ground. But today, I think, I've seen the city of Colorado Springs, probably in the past 3 to 4 years, are really partnering with businesses and developers and nonprofits to help them in the housing arena with some of those fees. Also, you have foundations now that also have set aside funding to assist nonprofits or developers in that arena also, to help them with the funding to get these projects off the ground. Because although it's, affordable housing apartments really benefit the residents, the initial phase is very costly. And so, you have to have some organizations that are willing to partner with you to help you get the funding and to get these projects off the ground. So I would probably say foundations are helping a whole lot more. You have businesses now that are coming together to say we want to collaborate in this whole housing industry because we realize that our employers need a place to live, and the city of Colorado Springs is a very strong partner in helping us get affordable housing off the ground.
There are also some exciting things happening in the city. You know, we've advocated for affordable housing in Colorado Springs for well over a decade, and it's nice to quite literally be on the stage in an economic forum talking about this topic now. A quick definition, if you don't mind. When we talk about affordable or attainable housing, most of you think, I think appropriately, that that's anyone in our community who's got sufficient income to afford a place to live, apartment, home, whatever that is. It's attainable if you are spending 1/3 or less of your income on rent. When we talk about affordable housing in our world, it's more like we think of it as a capital A, affordable, so that we are keeping that same threshold of 30% or less of your income towards rent. But we're doing it in a way where we take subsidy, a one-time subsidy on the front end of these projects to invest and get them done to reduce the debt service, and then set those units aside for people that are making 60 or 80% or less of area median income. So when we talk about affordable housing, it may be a little bit different than when you talk about sort of standard attainable housing. I will say over the last 10 or 12 years, our community has taken the lead in the state, and that is not overstating it, to say we are going to do something about this issue, because it's not just a low-income issue or a social work issue. This is a workforce and an economic driver of our community. And if you want a stable business, you better have stable employees, right? So our community has responded. Mayor Suthers and thankfully Mayor Yemi have advanced these topics, and we now see millions of dollars set aside every year by CSU for infrastructure improvements. The city has set aside and said we're going to make the materials for these low-income projects tax exempt, or at least rebated pretty significantly, to impact and incentivize the development of affordable housing. So we've seen great movement. The other thing that's happening sort of in the background is there are institutions in our community that have land. Available land is incredibly important. We all talk about infill properties, but there's available land on church properties and in school districts and even higher education that have available land that we can partner with, and that's happening all over town. Pastor Ben's project is a classic example of this, where they're building on congregational land. We're engaging with school districts, and I know one of the assistant superintendents in our area is significantly, they're all concerned about this, but I had a conversation where he's going out of state and even out of country to recruit teachers, and the number one question is, how affordable is housing? So we've got educators that are engaging with us and others to figure out this housing challenge, so that we can draw the type of backbone and foundation of workers in our community that we desperately need.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I add one other point I think is vital? When Lee is talking about affordable housing, there needs to be an education about this at times, because we think sometimes that affordable housing, multifamily housing is sort of your lower demographics of people. But no, these are your firemen, your policemen, your service workers, your teachers who are working every single day and need an affordable place to live. So I think sometimes when we hear affordable housing conversation, it tends to lend itself to thinking that somehow it's a lower class of individuals who get to live there. That's just not true. Matter of fact, I'll just speak for the Village at Solid Rock project, will increase housing value in our community. So that's the type of projects that are being built in the city, that they increase your personal home value in that community.
We've had dozens of questions roll in from the audience, and I think they've really latched onto this word of housing density, that we need to be okay with density. But the audience is asking, what about utilities? What about water, sewer, transportation, public transportation? How are those impacting access to affordable housing and the development of future housing projects?
So let's hit transportation, first of all, because our city is at a deficit in really high quality public transportation. And you want to, if you think in terms of what are your housing costs, you really need to think of three things, and it's your cost of housing, cost of utilities, and cost of transportation. Because if you have to move to Fountain or Pueblo to afford a place to live, your expenses because of that house have really increased because of the cost of transportation. So, and it really puts us in the city and in this area at a disadvantage when we're competing for statewide dollars and tax credit dollars when they consider what's the walkability score of your project or your property. And how are people going to, you know, if a priority in the QAP for CHAFA, their qualified allocation plan is how close you are to transit-oriented development, then it puts us at a disadvantage to be able to develop. Thankfully, CHAFA is responsive to that, but it is a metric that, and a lens through which they look at the projects that we're putting forward. You know, and I'm going to go on a little diversion here. Between 2004 and 2016, we had exactly 0 competitive projects awarded in Colorado Springs through the low-income housing tax credit program. I'm very happy to say that we are competitive in every round and have multiple projects, so we are competing. But those other issues do matter to our projects and to the people. I'll give you another definition. When I say projects, don't think of Chicago from 40 years ago, okay? A project is a project while it's still being conceived and designed. Once it's underway, it's like any other multifamily property. It's a property where people live.
Yeah. Any other comments or thoughts on infrastructure?
I guess the other thing I would say is, as a state, we have a preview on what this will look like if we don't handle these issues. A lot of our resort markets, people have to commute 40, 50 minutes, an hour to their jobs and in the resort communities. And I don't know about you, but I don't want us to be the enclave where kind of wealthier people live, and then our service sector has to commute long distances to our city. So I think we need to need to look at all price points of housing in our community, because we're only going to thrive if that happens. Just my personal opinion.
All right, I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal balls for this one. I'm getting more questions asking about booms and busts in the real estate market, right? And the questions are focused on, even with 2-income households not being able to afford rent in the city, or let alone a house. Are we possibly headed for a bust?
My answer will be quick, and then they can answer. Whether the economy's good and housing prices are high and the economy is really humming along, or whether there's a bust and we have a reduction in incomes and salaries, either way, affordable housing is a critical issue for the people that support and that are on the lower rungs of that income ladder.
I guess the question, I'm a little, I don't know if we can clarify it or not, but it sounds like a bust. A bust to me is kind of a 2008 overbuilding situation. And I don't think we're in that situation. In fact, I think that we're lagging behind in the amount of housing that needs to be developed. I mean, we have a temporary interest rate increase that will reach equilibrium within the next year or so. So that will be self-correcting, but we're still going to be left with our lack of housing, lack of available lots and so forth in our community. So it's something we need to address. Even if it looks like short-term, we may be having a slight downturn in the market.
And I'll just add, when you have that question about affordability with 2 incomes, affordable housing is based upon your average median income, 30% of your income up to 50 or 60%. We can't charge market rate. Market rate is what you're talking about when you're saying 2 incomes can't afford an apartment. That's because it's market rate. But you have the same quality of an apartment in affordable housing that will only charge you 30 to 60% of your income. So this is why affordable housing is important conversation in Colorado Springs, and that the community needs to really be educated about what it means to our community, what it means to people, what it means to income, and what it means to live in a place that's quality living. So I understand when I hear someone say, our family can't afford a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment with 2 incomes. And I say, well, you could afford it if there was affordable housing being built throughout the city and quality apartments being built throughout the city. And it doesn't have to be a density problem. It's a mixed housing situation. Have all kinds of housing throughout our communities. And then we wouldn't have to worry about, you know, the idea of not in my backyard, because we understand the fact that those affordable housings that are being built in my neighborhood is the same teacher who's teaching my child every single day. So let's understand when we talk about incomes not being able to afford a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, it can be done. We just have to understand and be willing to build a different type of project.
Thank you.
I'll just second what Jim said. I think that a bust implies a bubble, which implies overbuilding, which we're drastically underbuilding. I think that there is a risk, you know, with the interest rates and us continuing to underbuild, especially within the industries I'm focused on, and modular and other forms of innovative housing. Those are really dependent on having a steady pipeline of new projects incoming. And as interest rates stay high, if those new projects don't keep flowing in, then there's a risk of that smaller industry, which is, you know, it's nascent, it's young. There is a risk of you know, some companies struggling. And that's something that hopefully both between my program, the Innovative Housing Incentive Program, as well as the concessionary debt within Proposition 123, where we can kind of use some of our funding mechanisms to help steady it a bit.
It's clear we're underbuilding. We're not keeping up with the population growth and the demand for housing in our region. Can you speak to how regulations might be influencing that? And in particular, I've gotten several comments about the construction defect law, if any of you are willing to tackle that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I was on the Board of Housing Colorado for 6 years, and that was a constant topic. And for anybody that doesn't know, it's very difficult to build condos and townhomes that are high density but ownership model housing due to the construction defects law protections. There have been incremental gains over time, but it's severely limiting the ability of builders and developers to build this really affordable product and entry-level home ownership, which is how you start to build wealth in many ways. And we've got to address that. I've had the privilege of being on the mayor's Housing Solutions Group for the last 4 weeks as he's beginning to formulate his strategy going forward in these various areas. And construction defects is one of those areas. It's not a local topic, it is a statewide topic, but it will be on the list of those things that we're forwarding to the mayor to say we need to use our voice to say we can't be stuck by trial lawyers and other special interests to take this very high quality, reasonable way to build entry-level homes to keep that out of our portfolio. We need an all of the above approach.
I will tell you, I don't know how many people attended the State of the State that Governor Polis spoke at, but I was really encouraged that this is a topic that he is willing to open up for more discussion. So I think we're breaking some barriers down, perhaps, and so I'm pretty optimistic that that something could be coming to adjust the construction defect situation.
Thank you. Pastor Ben, you mentioned NIMBY, not in my backyard, right? And there's been historical opposition to the idea of dense housing and affordable housing in the region. Do you see that changing? Is the conversation changing on affordable housing? What progress is being made in that area?
Yes, Lee and I discussed this a lot. I think it has to do with education. How do we educate our community about affordable housing and what role it plays in the growth of a city? What role does it play in employers and businesses who want to keep the talent that they have in their organization or company, and how important that is to be able to have individuals afford to live in a city that we saw earlier that's on the top list of people who would love to come and live here, but can't really find an affordable place to live. And I think it has to do with all of us to understand the importance of, not everyone can afford a single family home. And yes, there needs to be programs that tend to transition us from apartment living to home ownership. I think that is the lifeblood of any community in terms of economic development, is home ownership or land ownership, right? So I think the conversation does have to change, and I think it is changing here in the city, because when we, as I've already mentioned, when we understand the significance of what affordable housing is, and multifamily homes, and how the quality of it that we're seeing being built today, I think most individuals now would probably say, okay, I need to take a second look at my thought process and how can it benefit my community. So the answer, yes, I believe that people's minds are changing.
I'll add one other comment to that, and that is, I think we've got to be as careful about characterizing people and their motivations just as much as we want them to consider ours. And that is, these are real people. A lot of the folks, we've done a couple of projects, did one down in Broadmoor Bluffs, and it drew some attention. And what we learned from that is, through the whole process and even afterwards, is the great majority, I'm not exaggerating that, are people that care about their community, they care about their neighborhood, they've been walking past the same green spot of land for the last 30 years, and suddenly somebody wants to build on it. It's reasonable to understand that emotion, that I don't want that developed. But we've got a growing community, and we've got need, and we cannot continue to sprawl outward. We need to take advantage of these infill opportunities. So I think we need to listen to the people, but we also need to respect that if a infill lot, or if a lot is appropriately zoned and platted and it's ready to go, there should be no objection to that. There shouldn't be a format where someone could object to that. If it's already planned and is appropriate and there are no variances or changes being requested, that's a buildable lot. There should be no objection to that.
Thank you. Jack, I'd like to direct this question toward you. Can you tell us about the innovative approaches and technologies that are emerging in the real estate sector that might be able to contribute to housing affordability? And I'll add to it, how can we incorporate those into the existing market dynamics here in this region?
Absolutely. And as Pastor Ben mentioned earlier, construction costs are really, along with interest rates, obviously, driving the housing affordability crisis we have across the state. And so we've kind of seen some opportunity in using technology to bring this industry that frankly hasn't seen any gains in productivity in 60 plus years. How can we use technology and offsite construction to really kind of bring that up to modernity? So we have a few different kind of forms of innovative housing that are within the program I manage. Modular is probably the one most people have heard of. Panelized housing, which is similar, but basically their units are shipped out flat and then stood up on site. Kit homes, similar concept. And another, and Eve, I'm happy Eve called this out earlier, is 3D printing. And we have a great local startup called StructureBot that's doing some exciting work on that front. The kind of common denominator among all of these is that they drastically accelerate the construction process and the timeline associated with it. They promise to eventually lower prices along with lowering the timeline. I think we need to kind of reach a certain scale to get there. And we're close, and some projects using these innovative technologies will beat out traditional stick-built. In some cases, they won't. It depends on the geography and tons of other factors. But really, I think Colorado is a ripe place for this to take off because we are especially limited. We have, it's hard enough to find workers to work in schools and hospitals. It's even harder to find construction labor. And the promise of off-site construction is that these are salaried jobs. They're more predictable 9-to-5 jobs. They're not affected by weather. And you know, so it's a benefit to workers as well. There are definitely some hurdles to integration. To answer the second part of your question, the big one that I've heard from the industry is financing. There's this kind of fundamental misalignment where from the traditional development process to the factory development process, where in a factory, maybe 9 months ahead of when the project is going to be completed, you need to secure your spot in line, and the manufacturer needs to order their materials for that particular project, and therefore they need a good chunk of the money way out in advance. So that can be tricky for developers and kind of both sides of the equation. So we're working with local and regional banks to help address that. And again, I think that as the broader innovative housing industry reaches scale, it's really just a matter of familiarity, and having done it once or twice before, then it'll kind of pick up some more momentum. And then similarly, general contractors also struggle with having not done projects like these before. And we often find that a GC's first modular project has cost overruns and headaches galore, and then their second and third go way more smoothly, and they're able to achieve those cost minimizations. So, and then finally, I'll just add, you know, we were talking about regulation. I think building codes are another limitation. I think I've heard something like 2/3 of new housing built every year is in an HOA, and HOAs tend to have pretty restrictive building codes, and those often don't align with the boxes that are shipping out. And may I say, lovely boxes shipping out of these Colorado factories. Okay. So we do need to also, you know, some more permissive building codes, I think would drastically kind of address this supply-demand issue we have.
Thank you. Jack might have been best positioned to answer innovation in the technology, but I'm curious to open the question up to other innovations that you see happening in housing affordability and how that's affecting the landscape for the future.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing what OEDIT does with the equity program and concessionary debt program. We can't just depend on low-income housing tax credits. So really grateful for Prop 123 and the people across the state that supported that, and we're looking forward to that. We need more equity programs to get these projects done.
Thank you. There's a general question from the audience. This comes from David Reeve. He asks, what is the biggest hurdle to achieving our housing goals, and how do we overcome them? I know that's a very broad question, so I'd like you to put it within your own scope of the housing goals of keeping up with housing demand and helping housing become affordable again.
Well, I'll start. There's a limited number of funds, and it's set on a per capita basis each year that's available through the low-income housing tax credit program or the state tax credit program, and those projects are incredibly competitive. There may be 40 applications twice a year, and of those, 11 will get awarded, and it's not because of the quality of the projects that are being advanced, it's because of the amount of funds that are available to support those. So the middle income housing tax program that folks are talking about, and the Prop 123 funds, those are all going to help. So it's incredibly competitive, but and when you have to go through with what we're hearing is a quality project, to go through 2 or 3 cycles of applications that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I would say I would tag on to what actually Pastor Ben said earlier, is we are very fortunate in Colorado Springs. There's a couple of large foundations in town that will fund the pre-development work to be able to apply for these LIHTC grants. And so, I think that's a positive. I think we could do more, but there's a lot of projects that could get off the ground, but it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars even to go through the application process. So, it's a barrier, but also I think somewhat of a strength that we have because we're such a generous community.
I'll add, advocacy is important to changing some of the policies and rules of housing. Jack just spoke of some of the barriers. A shout out to, we just started Pikes Peak Housing Network, Executive Director David Lloyd and Randy Scott. That organization is going to be pivotal here in Colorado Springs in terms of advocacy and policy change regarding housing. And we all need to come together when we see opportunities for change. Let's get on that train. One of the things that I would love to be able to see take place is that individuals who are leasing an apartment, that a percentage of your lease for your 3 or 4 years that you're in an apartment could possibly go to escrow, and you take those dollars and now you're in a place where you can afford to purchase a home and build some generational wealth for you and your family. And so apartment dwelling doesn't have to be the lifeblood of your existence. So we need to change the rules sometimes to accommodate and help our community. And that to me is something I think is revolutionary, but it's not impossible to do. So hopefully Pikes Peak Housing Network, I know you're out there, you hear me, right? We can do some of those things to help change policies in our community.
And I'll just add a kind of a favorite issue of mine as a nerdy urbanist. Parking is essential and a huge hurdle to affordable housing development. I think typically it's about 30% of project costs on a multifamily development. And typically, especially on affordable housing projects that have access to transit, you don't need that much parking. And Denver recently passed an ordinance allowing just 1 parking spot for every 10 bedrooms. And that's drastic. That might not be applicable locally. I hear grumbles. I had trouble parking today, so yeah. I'm not saying that's appropriate statewide, but I do think that taking a close look at parking is valuable and worth doing.
I totally agree.
Thank you.
Yeah. The future of community is that we live and work and shop all in the same place. That's the future of urban planning. So if that's the case, we don't need as many cars and we don't need as many parking spaces when we're trying to build. So parking spaces is a big, a hurdle when you're trying to plan housing. Right now, there has to be one parking spot for every tenant. And sometimes that's really not necessary. So, Jack, let's do something about that.
There were specific questions about parking, and honestly, being on UCCS campus most every day, it's an issue we're drastically concerned about as well. We have time for one more question. So the final question is an amalgamation of a few that have come in. We have concerned community members here, people that are interested, that want to know more, that want to learn more, and that want to be part of what Pastor Ben is saying about educating our community on affordable housing. What resources should we be turning to educate ourselves, and how can we spread that message?
I'll start with Pikes Peak Housing Network. When it was in its infancy, was the Affordable Housing Collaborative, and we put together two things: an educational PowerPoint, and then a hub, a website where you can go to learn how to advocate, to access the people in the community, to know the developers. If you Google Pikes Peak Housing Network, you will be sure to find that website, and I'm sure at least one person in the audience right now is scrambling to say, we need to update it. We probably do, but good information is there. You can contact any of us. We are advocates for this every single day, and you can contact us at any time. But be connected and listen, and pay attention. Pay attention to your kids. They're the ones that are graduating, and you want them to have a place to live, right? And pay attention to your parents. This is one last thing I wanted to end on, is we not only have to think about the drivers when we're talking about a vibrant economy, but what are those areas that are invisible or not seen that are potential drags or have deficits that we're not paying attention to. And just recently, I've especially tuned into seniors. And the issue is not only, it is preserving and being able to age in place, but I've become acutely aware of this 30% standard of paying 30% of your income towards housing costs. When you think about seniors, they're not like somebody that's 25 and spending 30% of their income on housing costs, even with a similar income, because of the cost of health care. So we have seniors that the calculation, that 30% calculation doesn't work because medication and healthcare and all the other costs that come along with aging, but also an inability to increase your income as you reach 85 and 90 years old. Those are the people we better be tuning into as well.
Your parents.
And I would say, just for the everyday citizen, the everyday person that's here today, if you make affordable, attainable housing part of your economic discussions, it is an important economic driver. We learned through the whole Space Command back and forth that we had, that really the only issue that Colorado Springs really couldn't say that we had compared to our competitor in Alabama was affordable housing. I mean, that was true. And so we realized how important that is. Affordable housing, education, some of those more intangible things, we tend to think of job creation and so forth. But how about when we bring in these jobs, are there going to be affordable, attainable housing for those people that are locating here, and for the services and the service sector that they're going to need to prosper? So,
Good point, Jim.
I'll just add at the state level, OEDIT is actually, we're relatively new to housing with this influx of funding from Proposition 123. The Department of Local Affairs Division of Housing, which Eve mentioned earlier, they're the face of state government at the local level, and we have regional managers who are brilliant and know how to navigate which state level funding can help accelerate projects over here. So definitely connect with DOLA yeah, they're the real leaders in this space, and we're lucky to work with them.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being such an engaged audience. We had over 50 questions come in. I'm sorry I couldn't get to them all. And thank you to Jim, Jack, Ben, and Lee, our expert panelists today.
All right, everybody, if you could please move towards your seat. I can see some people are still filtering back in. Oh, thank you so much, guys. This is a big room, so thank you everyone for attending. I just want to thank you guys all again for being here. Also, I want to do a big shout out to our two moderators, Dr. Matt Metzger and Dr. Dustin Bloom. If you guys could give them a round of applause real quick. In case you guys don't know, those are two of my best friends. I actually did a backpacking trip with them in July, and I basically voluntold them to show up for this event. So, you know, they didn't really have a big choice about that, but I was like, you guys are doing this event, so thank you to both you guys for doing that. Thank you again for being here. I hope you had a good time at the breakout sessions. So, what we're going to do now is the Southern Colorado Economic Outlook from myself and Bill Craighead. This is really Bill's baby. I got to tell you guys that right off the bat. It's very nice that he put my name on there, but he's going to be running the show here. So, at any rate, I'm going to do a little introduction for Bill as well. So, I met Bill, I think, 8 to 10 years ago. I can't remember exactly, but we kind of came to Colorado Springs around the same time. He was at Colorado College. I, of course, was at UCCS. I actually taught a couple classes for Colorado College. He taught a class for UCCS. He then moved to the Air Force Academy, and now we have him here. Now, a fun story about Bill is that when I first got this job about a year ago as the interim, I think I'd been in the job maybe a week or two, and I got an email from Bill saying, hey, so are you the interim? Are you going to get the real job? Or like, is that going to be posted at some point? And I told him, I was like, well, you know, we're working on it, but maybe in about a year we'll post. He's like, okay, let me know. Please let me know. So, okay. Fast forward about a year, we're looking at applications. I haven't seen Bill's application come in, and I'm like, oh man, oh man, oh man. Luckily, his came in with like 5 days to spare. It was by far the best application, and he ended up getting the job. Now, one other thing I got to tell you about Bill is that when we hired him, we absolutely told him, you don't have to be part of this Economic Forum event. We're hiring you in July. It's only 2 months later. It's going to be a lot of moving parts, getting in, getting your feet wet, figuring everything out. And he said, oh, okay, that's great. And as he moved in, he just came in and took charge. It was fantastic. He has just been such a big part of this organization to start with. He took over, took the bull by the reins, the proverbial reins, and just ran with it. One last thing I got to tell you about Bill, because this is my favorite part of his interview. So we asked him, like, what's got you really excited about doing this job? And he said, you know, I wake up some mornings on Thursdays, and I just can't wait for the BLS report to come out. It's like 5 a.m., I'm drinking my coffee, and I'm just looking for that report. And I was like, wow, this is the job for you. Like, this is fantastic. So when you think about data, Bill is absolutely the man. So with that, please welcome Dr. Bill Craighead. So,
Hey.
Well done.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you for your hard work over the past year. Joe has not only kept the forum going, he's really worked hard to strengthen and improve it over the past year and done all of that on top of his regular duties as a professor and chair of the economics department. So we owe him a huge debt of gratitude. It's an honor for me to be up here as the new director of the Economic Forum. The forum has become a civic asset for Colorado Springs, thanks to the inspiration of our founding partners and UCCS faculty 27 years ago, support over the years from our community, from our partners and UCCS, and the great work done by my predecessors, which I'll have the privilege of building on as I work with all of you in the months and years to come. As Joe mentioned, I officially became a UCCS employee in late July. I've been really impressed with the people. Our fantastic team had already done most of the hard work of getting this event ready before I showed up. We've had help in lots of different ways from people all across the institution, including many of our colleagues who volunteered to help us out today. Thanks to the Ent Center, the staff here has been fantastic. The venue is absolutely beautiful. I'd like to thank the mayor and Eve Lieberman and our fantastic panelists today for contributing their time and insight to this event. Particular thanks to our Economic Forum partners who we engage with throughout the year. We supply them with some information and analysis, and they support us on an ongoing basis. We've recognized we have more partners than we can recognize on a single slide, but we've recognized our other partners in the program as well, and we're really grateful for their ongoing support. We wouldn't exist without them. And I also want to thank the event day partners who've provided additional support that's helped make the event today possible. So I want to start with just kind of putting the economic situation in overall context. So I want to step back a little bit and show you employment in the United States during the last 3 recessions. So these are all scaled to be 100 in the month before the recession, and we see how U.S. employment evolved following in the 2001 recession, the 2008-2009 recession, and the 2020 recession. And you can immediately see, how different that recession was in 2020 from what we'd seen before. The spring of 2020 was a strange and stressful time for all of us. I was teaching up the road. We were in the middle of our semester of intermediate macroeconomics when I was sent home to figure out how to teach online. And I was trying to figure out what was going on with the economy. And a normal thing that an economist would look at in a situation like this would be applications for unemployment insurance. But the state systems to process those applications were so overwhelmed that data was no good. But we got the estimate from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in early May that we had lost 20 million jobs in April 2020, 20 million jobs in 1 month. Now, I'm old enough that I was an economist back in 2008 and 2009, and I remember some months in late 2008, early 2009, when we were losing like 600,000 or 700,000 jobs in a month, and how horrifying and terrible that was when it happened. And yet here we were losing 20 million jobs in just 1 month. But one of the things that was really horrible about the recession we had in 2008 and 2009 was the speed of the recovery. That the economy started to recover in the second half of 2009, but that recovery was agonizingly slow. The unemployment rate remained high, and many people suffered from really prolonged, persistent spells of unemployment, which is really damaging not only to people's financial status, but also their personal sense of well-being. And when we were looking at this in the spring of 2020, we were worried about something similar happening on an even larger scale. If you went back to that time and told me that we'd get all the jobs lost, we'd get them all back in less than a year and a half, I don't think I would have believed you. So that decline in employment was completely unprecedented, but the speed of the recovery was unexpectedly amazing. And if we look locally, so this figure shows employment in Colorado Springs, and when I say Colorado Springs in this talk, I'm going to be referring to the metropolitan statistical area of of El Paso and Teller counties, showing the employment for Colorado Springs, for the state of Colorado, and for the United States as a whole. And they're all scaled to be 100 just before the start of the downturn, so you're kind of tracing out the percentage change. And what we saw here was we had a little bit less of a severe of a decline in employment in 2020 and an even stronger recovery. And our employment today is almost 6 percentage points higher than it was before the pandemic, which is, I think, really amazing and remarkable. So the economy's great. I guess there is this one thing that we do need to talk about. This is a graph of the most common way that we report inflation, which is the year-on-year change in the consumer price index. And this goes up through summer of last year, up through June of 2022, when inflation peaked at 9.1%, which is the highest inflation rate we'd had since November of 1981. And the median American is about 39 years old, so for most Americans, this is the highest inflation of their lifetimes. Now, the main job of the Federal Reserve is to prevent high inflation. So they realized, perhaps a little belatedly, that things were really going in the wrong direction. And they responded by raising interest rates. So essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the growth rate of spending down so that it's consistent with the growth rate of our ability to produce goods and services. And they have their tool for doing this is interest rates, and it's a very blunt and imprecise tool. But what I'm showing here is the change in interest rates in the federal funds rate, which is their policy interest rate, in the current tightening cycle. So they started raising rates in March of 2022, and I'm comparing that with the change in the federal funds rate that had happened in several other recent tightening episodes. So you can see here that they were raising rates more and faster than they have in the past. So they were really hitting the brakes hard. And when they do that, that creates concern about a recession. As I said, their tool is the effect of interest rates on the economy is somewhat uncertain. The famous quote from the great economist Milton Friedman is that monetary policy works with long and variable lags. So a lot of times when they do this, it doesn't work out quite the way they would like it to. And about half of the time that we have a tightening cycle from the Fed in interest rates, we end up with a recession. And then another thing that a lot of people look at is the index of leading economic indicators. And this is an average of several different bits of data that all have a forward-looking character to them, things like new orders. And that started signaling a coming recession last spring. And then a favorite of economists is the US Treasury yield curve. So normally long-term rates are higher than short-term interest rates. But with an inverted yield curve, the short-term rates are higher than the long-term interest rates. And that happens when people in financial markets, when bond traders think that short-term interest rates are going to come down in the future, which is what we would expect to happen in a recession. And that inverted yield curve actually has a really good track record of being a recession predictor. But that was all last year. Here we are more than a year later. Job growth is still positive. The unemployment rate is still at historic lows. So it's kind of like when you're in your car and the check engine light comes on and you get that feeling in your gut like, oh no, what am I in for? But you keep driving and you keep driving and there are no funny smells or weird noises, so you're starting to think your car's okay and it was a false alarm. That's kind of where we are now. The unemployment rate is low, and it has been low for a long time, or for a considerable amount of time. So we don't really get much information from looking at changes in the unemployment rate. It's just been kind of stuck, and this is awesome. It's been stuck at a really low level for some time now. But there are some other things that we can look at that tell us about how the labor market's doing. We went through a period in late 2021 and early 2022, and you're reading all these stories about businesses having trouble hiring and retaining workers. That you go to a restaurant or a store and you have a note on the door, oh, we're closed because of a staffing shortage. And one way that we can pick up that labor market tightness in the data is look at how many vacancies there are per unemployed worker. The gold line is the data for the state of Colorado, and the gray line is the data for the United States. So we can see that Colorado had a tighter labor market than the United States overall prior to the pandemic, and then labor market tightness goes way down, and then it comes back, and ends up at a point where it's extremely tight by historical standards. There are a lot of vacancies for every unemployed worker, even more so in Colorado than in the country as a whole. But if you look at kind of the last year, you can see that there's a gentle trend downward in that measure of labor market tightness. Another thing that we can look at to gauge the labor market is the rate at which people are quitting their jobs. Now, the older folks in the room will remember Johnny Paycheck and Take This Job and Shove It, which if you know the lyrics to that song, it's actually kind of a sad song because it's about somebody who wants to quit their job and they can't. But when people feel empowered to tell their boss, take this job and shove it, I ain't working here no more, that's a sign that they feel confident that they'll be able to find something else. That's another sign that the labor market is really hot. And we can see that in late 2021 and early 2022, we had a really elevated quits rate. But that's also started to come back down towards more historically normal levels. So, I think the labor market, I'd say it's still hot, but it's not as insanely hot as it was at the beginning of 2022. Coming back to inflation, so the gray line in this graph continues the graph that I showed you a couple of minutes ago. And we see that inflation's come down a lot. So that's the same year-on-year change in the consumer price index. It's way down from where it was last summer. And the gold line is the growth rate of median wages. So when prices are going up faster than wages, people are losing purchasing power. So it's really no wonder. So in that period from 2021 to most of 2022, the gray line's above the gold line. So each paycheck is buying less and less. So it's really no wonder that people have been so unhappy with economic conditions despite the low unemployment rate because they're losing purchasing power. But if you look at the end of the graph, you see inflation's come down a lot. The growth rate of wages has also come down a little bit, but for most of this year, wages have been going up faster than prices. So people are starting to see gains in their purchasing power. Those paychecks are starting to buy more. And that's showing up in how people feel about the economy. One measure of that comes from the State University in the great state of Michigan, where they do a big survey of consumers and they ask them a set of questions about their financial situations, but also how they feel about their futures and the future of the economy. And they roll that together in this index of consumer sentiment. And that bottomed out last year, right when inflation was peaking. And as inflation's come down, consumer sentiment, how people are feeling about the economy, is starting to come back, although it's still well short of where it was prior to the pandemic. Now I want to turn to housing and real estate for a little bit. And there's been a big increase in the demand for housing. And one of the factors driving that is that we saw with the pandemic an increase in household formation. So this graph is representing the number of households in Colorado Springs in the gold line, which is scaled on the left axis, and the number of households in the United States, which is the gray line and scaled on the right axis. And you can see that both of those lines get steeper after 2019, which is an increase in the rate of household formation. So the census defines a household as any group of people living together. And what we're not talking about here is really the population changing. We're talking about how the people we have, how they are kind of fragmenting into a larger number of smaller households. And part of what's driving that is the shift in our working arrangements. So I've got some data here from a research project from Nick Bloom at Stanford University, showing that most people are back to work at work. But we've got a fairly significant number of people who have hybrid work arrangements where they may be at work, maybe in the office 2 to 4 days a week. And then we've got a smaller but still substantial number of people who do work on a fully remote basis. So if you think about a household, a group of roommates, and it's one thing if that household, everybody gets up in the morning and they go off to work at their separate jobs and they come back in the evening. It's quite another thing if everybody in that household gets up in the morning and then they're all trying to have separate simultaneous Zoom meetings at the same kitchen table, right? So this household formation, part of it is, hey, instead of having a roommate, I want that extra bedroom for a home office. So there's just an increase in demand for residential space that we see in the household formation data. So if you're an economist, or if you have, I hope you've had some chance to study some economics. If we have an increase in demand for something, we expect the price to go up. And that's exactly what happened. And we can see that in rents. So this is rent data for Denver for comparison purposes, which is the green line. Colorado Springs is the gold line, and the US overall is the gray line. And there's a huge increase in rents in 2021 through the first half of 2022. So the rents peaked in late 2022. Locally, they came down a little bit at the end of the year, and they've been kind of flat since then. But they're still way above where they were a couple of years ago. So renters have really been socked. This has been a really big increase in their cost of living. We also see the same thing when we look at prices of homes. So this is the median sale price of single-family homes. It's been a little bit sideways over the last year or so. I made these slides before the August figures, before we got the August figures from the Pikes Peak Realtors, but it's ticked back up to, I think, 480 in July, but it's still pretty much sideways over the last year. But that follows a pretty significant run-up. And house prices are now about 40% above where they were 4 years ago. And you can also see Denver and the United States up there for comparison. One of the reasons that house prices have started to go sideways instead of up over the last year has been higher interest rates. So the gold line here is the rate on 30-year mortgages, and the gray line here is the rate on 10-year U.S. Treasury bonds. There are a lot of factors at play that are influencing long-term interest rates and pushing them up. Some of that comes from the Fed. These are affected both by people's expectations of what their short-term rates are going to be in the future, but also they hold a lot of treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities on their balance sheet, and part of their approach to cooling off the economy is to sell off some of those bonds into the market, which tends to push up long-term rates. The prospect of more government borrowing tends to drive up long-term interest rates. And then also, I think compared to what we might have expected a few years ago, I think there are more prospects for a larger degree of demand for investment from the private sector. And some of this is policy driven. So some of this is related to policies like the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which are incentivizing firms to build things like chip foundries and battery factories, and that private investment is going to be financed in the markets from the same pool of savings that we draw on to finance mortgages. So that's another factor pushing long-term rates up. So with higher home prices and high interest rates, of course, that has a severe impact on affordability. Affordability has a lot of different dimensions, but one place that we can see this is looking from the point of view of somebody thinking about buying a home in Colorado Springs. How much is their monthly payment going to be? And in 2020, that monthly payment would have been about a quarter of median household income. Now it's over 40%. Now that increase is not unique to us. You see it if you look at Denver. You see it if you look at the United States as a whole. We're more affordable than Denver. And we're actually a little bit more affordable than the United States as a whole, which might seem surprising at first, because we all know that housing is expensive here. But this is also a high income area. So that helps us when we look at a measure like this. All right, so I call this one Mountain Sunset. But what it actually is it's a representation of the share of outstanding mortgages in Colorado at different interest rates. So we're kind of breaking down the composition of the rates on all the mortgages that are out there. The gray area, or the green area, is the share of mortgages with rates less than 3%. So you see when the Fed was really holding rates down in 2021, that area starts to grow. And then the gold area is the share of mortgages that are between 3 and 4%. And then each band above that is another range of interest rates. And the top range there is the mortgages over 6%. So you can see right at the end, that starts to get a little bigger as some people have had to take out mortgages at the high rates that we're seeing today. But the dominant feature here is the growth of the gold and the green areas. So that area, that share of mortgages that are out there that are outstanding with rates under 4%. And some people on the internet are referring to this as mortgage winter. So if you think about somebody who has a mortgage at an average rate here of 3.7%, and they're thinking about, well, maybe I want to move, maybe I want a different house, maybe I want to live somewhere else. So I could sell my house and buy another house. But if I sell my house, I also have to give up my 3.7% mortgage. And on that new house, I'm going to have to take out a mortgage at over 7%. And that's a huge impediment to people selling their homes and moving. So when we have a mortgage winter, it leads to a freeze on home sales. And I don't think I need to tell the realtors in the room about this. I'm sure it's hurting your business. But house sales have a strong seasonal pattern, and the peak that we had this summer was about 20% off from previous seasonal peaks. So there are just fewer transactions going on in the housing market. Now, one of the things about fewer existing homes going on the market is that might actually be a bit of a help for home builders, that it pushes people into the market for new homes. This is showing building permits. The gray area are the single-family dwellings, and stacked on top of that are the permits for multifamily dwellings. Building is extremely sensitive to interest rates. And you see there was a big drop in building in late 2022 when the Fed started raising rates. But it looks like it's starting to come back. I wouldn't pay too much attention to that spike at the end, because there was a deadline of June 30th to get permits in under the before a change in the building code. So some of the permits that might normally have been put in July were pulled forward into June. So there's a little bit of a spike and then a drop off for kind of a technical reason that's not really related to the state of the housing market. So I want to talk about a couple of other positive signs for the local economy. One is to look at our travel and tourism industry. This activity is very seasonal in nature. So what I've done is I've plotted measures last year with the gray line, and then plotted this year's data on top of that with the gold line. So first, if we look at hotel occupancy, you can see that our hotel occupancy this year is about the same as last year. So that doesn't look like a very exciting figure. But the number of rooms available in Colorado Springs is actually up quite a bit from last year. So if we have the same occupancy rate, but with more rooms, that means we have more people staying in hotels here. And then things have been really busy at the airport. You could say that the enplanements, so this is the number of people getting on planes, has taken off this summer. That we've had just the last couple of months, it's running well ahead of last year. They've had success in attracting new routes, but they also have a higher load factor, so they have more people on each plane in addition to having more planes. And then another bit of information that Eve Lieberman already touched on is that we've been on a real winning streak as far as attracting employers to Colorado Springs, and particularly employers that are going to be bringing jobs that pay above median wages. So they will raise the average income levels in this community. So there have been a lot of announcements of either new firms coming in or existing firms announcing expansions. And the folks who work on economic development in this community, they've been really busy and they've been doing a great job. So I want to shift now and talk a little bit about some demographic information. First, by thinking about how our population here has changed in the past couple of decades. So I've got some population figures shaded in silver there. So you can see the population of El Paso County is up by more than 200,000 in the last 20 years. The population's become older on average, and that's shown in orange. So the median age is higher, and the share of people over 65 is higher now than it was 20 years ago. And the share of people over the age of 25 who have a college degree, shaded in green, that's also up by about 10 percentage points compared to a couple of decades ago. So if we compare ourselves to Colorado as a whole and to the United States overall, we can see that relative to the country, our median household income is about $10,000 higher than it is for the US overall. So we're more affluent. Our population is younger than the country as a whole. So we're older than we were 20 years ago, but we're younger than the country overall. Our median age is lower, and our share of people aged 65 and up is a little bit smaller. We also have a higher education level measured by the share of people with college degrees here. And then shaded in gray are some data related to the share of veterans, the share of government employees, and the share of the military in our population. Our share in the military is an order of magnitude higher than the country as a whole. But we also have a significantly larger veteran population and a larger share of government employees, which is tied to the military and defense economy, because we not only have soldiers, airmen, and guardians at our military installations, but we also have civilian employees working at those places. And also related to that military and defense economy is that we have a more mobile population, that the share of people who are here from out of state is relatively high. Now, Colorado overall is an affluent, highly educated state. And the data for Colorado is going to be dominated by a certain metro area a little bit north of here, which has a higher income and even higher income and higher education levels than we do. So compared to the state, we're a little bit lower in terms of per capita or in terms of household income, and we're a little bit lower in terms of the share of people with college degrees. We're also a little bit younger, and all of those things are somewhat related to each other. Now, the state demographer is predicting that the population here will continue to grow, and that will be over 900,000 in 2040. Our population is going to continue to get older on average, that the share who are over 65 is going to go up, but we'll still be, the rest of the country is going to get older too, and we'll still be younger than the rest of the country. The implied percentage growth rate from that forecast is a 1.2% annual rate of population growth, which is double the forecast population growth rate for the United States as a whole. And in percentage terms, it's a little bit slower than the growth rate that we had over the past 20 years. And when we are here for the 54th UCCS Economic Forum, we can discuss whether the state demographer was correct in predicting that we would reach a population of 1 million in 2050. Now, I want to shift again and talk about the near-term economic outlook. And there are some cautionary signs on the horizon for us to think about. So first, I want to look at some economic forecasts. So this is coming from the Survey of Professional Forecasters, which is conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. So it's not the Fed forecasting this, but the Philly Fed goes out and surveys professional forecasters at Wall Street institutions and places like that. And if you look at their GDP growth rate that they are forecasting for 2024, they're forecasting a lower growth rate in 2024 of 1.3%. The forecasters have kind of backed off from some of the recession calls that they were making last year and earlier this year, but they are still predicting a slowdown in economic growth. And we need growth of about 2% to keep unemployment stable, right? Because every year you have more people and workers are more productive. So you need to produce more output every year just to keep the same share of people employed every year. So if growth slows down to 1.3%, that would also imply a modest increase in the unemployment rate. So if we went up to 4% or even 4.5%, that would still be really low by historical standards. If you wanted to take the national forecasts and translate them for the region, I looked at how our growth in the Colorado Springs area compared to the national GDP growth over the period 2007 to 2019. And during that whole kind of complete economic cycle, our growth rate was actually pretty close to the US overall. We just grew a smidge faster, 1/10 of a percentage point. That surprised me a lot because I moved here in 2016, so the entire time that I've lived in Colorado Springs, it's been a crazy fast-growing place. But the earlier part of the decade of the 2010s, we were actually growing a little bit slower than the U.S. economy overall. And I think Eve Lieberman alluded to that in her keynote earlier today. In terms of unemployment, our unemployment rate locally and also statewide typically is a little bit lower than the unemployment rate for the United States overall by about 0.3 of a percentage point. Mortgage rates are forecast to start going back down at some point next year. These are forecasts for the third quarter of next year, so a year from now, from Fannie Mae and the Mortgage Bankers Association. So you can see, while people are forecasting a decrease in mortgage rates, there's some disagreement about how much they'll go down. And nobody is forecasting that we'll return to the 3 to 4% range that we saw a couple of years ago. Now, those forecasts are predicting some degree of economic slowdown, and that's kind of what we would expect with higher interest rates. And some of the local data that we've seen recently is showing some signs of softness. One indicator are the collections of sales tax by the city proper, the city of Colorado Springs. They're running pretty close to last year's. But with inflation, if you had the same amount of economic activity this year as last year, you would expect a higher dollar amount. So if the dollar amount is about the same, that means that the amount of underlying economic activity is actually down by a little bit. And the main reason for this is they're getting a lot less revenue from sales of building supplies. And that's not entirely surprising because things like major home renovation projects and stuff like that are going to be very sensitive to interest rates. Another indicator of potential slowdown is that our growth in payrolls has flattened out in the past several months. So when economists look at employment, we usually look at data from two main sources, a survey of households and a survey of firms. And if you look at the household survey data, the number of people who say they have a job is still going up. But if you talk to businesses, the number of people that they say they have on payrolls has kind of flattened out. All of this data that we look at, almost all this data that we look at is based on surveys, and sometimes they don't line up exactly with each other. But the fact that one of the surveys is indicating payrolls are flat is another sign of the economy cooling off a little bit. And just one more is the data that we got in the second quarter on commercial vacancy rates. So industrial vacancy rates ticked down, but the other categories increased in the second quarter. Those figures for retail and medical office vacancy rates are not out of line with what we've seen in the recent past. The office vacancy rate is a little bit higher than it has been in the recent past. 10.9% is the highest office vacancy rate since 2015 for Colorado Springs. All right, so I want to sum up a little bit here, both for the short term and the long term. For the short term, I think we're seeing more optimism that we may pull off a so-called soft landing, where the Fed is able to get inflation down without inducing a recession. But there's still quite a number of risks lurking out there that I think we need to be mindful of over the next year. One of those risks comes from the Fed itself. I think their worst fear is that they let up too soon and inflation comes back and they have to raise rates again. And I think they are so worried about avoiding that they may err on the side of keeping rates too high for too long. Another source of risk is from commercial real estate. So if work from home and our change in our working arrangements has led to a permanent increase in the demand for residential space, it's also led to a permanent decrease in the demand for office space. Locally, things seem a lot better than they are in some other parts of the country. Our office vacancy rate is 6 percentage points lower than Denver's, for example. But even if we're spared the worst from this locally, the national banking system is heavily exposed to commercial real estate, so it will still have an impact on financial conditions nationwide. Another place where we may see some trouble is in corporate debt. Corporations, when interest rates were low, corporations borrowed a lot, and they're going to have to refinance some of that debt. So they typically are not borrowing for 30 years. They're borrowing it at shorter maturities. So they're going to run into the need to roll over some of that debt at higher interest rates. And that's going to put stress on corporate balance sheets. And it wouldn't shock me to see more corporate bankruptcies and things like that over the next year. In the very near future, like I think next week, there's a possibility that we might have a strike by the United Auto Workers. We're a long way from Detroit, but a widespread and prolonged strike by the auto workers, that's a big enough industry that it would have an effect on national economic data. And another risk that we face is the federal fiscal year is ending at the end of the month. We've gotten pretty used to short government shutdowns, and we shrug them off pretty well. But if there was a shutdown and it turned out to be a prolonged shutdown, it would have an impact on the economy. People, when you tell people you're an economist, they always want to talk about gas prices. So, I think for oil and commodities, on the one hand, we've got other major economies like China and Europe are not doing that great. So that should put downward pressure on commodities. But with commodities, and particularly with oil, there's always some geopolitical risk, right? That the uptick in oil prices lately has been attributed to production cuts by the Saudis and the Russians. So there's always some risk of some geopolitical change or geopolitical event hitting oil and commodities. And food prices, as we head into an El Nino climate pattern, that may disrupt some crops and show up in the prices that we see at the grocery store. So while we're cautiously optimistic about a soft landing, I think it's going to be like coming in for a landing on a summer afternoon in Colorado. You want to fasten your seatbelts and keep your tray tables up. For the longer run, one thing that we have going for us that kind of came up in that demographic data that I showed you is the large military and defense economy that we have here. That should act as a stabilizing factor, that even if there's an economic downturn, the Air Force Academy is not going to cut back on the number of cadets, right? That the activity emanating from our military installations is not going to be affected by the overall ups and downs of the economy. It does, however, expose us to another source of risk, which is the possibility of decisions that are unfavorable to us that are made in Washington or made at the Pentagon. So if you know somebody from Huntsville, you can ask them about that. And as I showed, and as Eve Lieberman talked about in more depth, we're continuing to attract new employers who are bringing high-wage jobs to the region, and our demographics are favorable to continued growth. Now, growth is a mixed blessing, right? That there are a lot of challenges associated with growth. It can strain resources, create issues in transportation and education, and particularly housing. So I think as a region, we're going to be continuing to face those challenges in the years ahead. But I think I would rather be facing the challenges of growth than the challenges of managing decline. Where we see another, part of the story on the increase in demand for housing is that now, houses have this other use, right? That they can be for families to live in, but they could also be, it's much more easy to rent them out now. So, the increase in demand for housing.
Pointed to some of the warning signs to look forward to. One of them, the federal government shutdown looming possibly at the end of the month. If that happens, and obviously they're always more short-term than long-term, at least in recent history, would that affect a military, government-centric community like Colorado Springs more so than other parts of the country? Is that a concern?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, if I remember right, the last one happened when I was working at the Air Force Academy, and they passed the defense bill and they shut down the rest of the government. But I think if the government shutdown includes the military, yeah, it would have a local impact. So that is another way in which we're kind of exposed to more risk from Washington.
Is it all about the timing or how long it would linger, I guess?
Yeah, because I think what typically happens when these happen is that when the shutdown ends, all the workers who were furloughed or get their back pay. So if it's usually it's a couple of days, mm-hmm. and then people get upset and they bang some heads together and sort it out. Look at the re-election calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think exactly. As long as it's a relatively short one, not a huge risk. If it's a long one, or we get into some brinksmanship sort of things, it could be badder news.
Are we at risk of? I want to know to ask. You had pointed out that we are seeing some major corporations already putting the foot down and saying remote work is not something that we want to do, at least as large as the number of people involved as we did during the pandemic. Is that something that's going to continue, do you believe, moving forward? Where do you see this remote concept moving forward?
Yeah, I can take a jump in on there. So, I mean, remote work is here to stay to some extent. Absolutely. I mean, I think we were moving that direction already, and COVID-19 just sped it all up. You know, we had Zoom technology, we had Teams, we had all these things, virtual meetings, and it just really sped it up. Now, as you said, we're going back to some big corporations saying we're not doing that anymore, we're not going to do it. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not going back to work. And it's easy to say you're not going back to work when you still have a lot of savings. It's not so easy to say that, 3 to 5 months in the future. I mean, at some point you're going to say, oh, I'm not getting a paycheck. Maybe I will go back to work. That being said, I do think there are some structural preference changes of people realizing more flexible work. So you may see more of these hybrid type situations, 80-20, things like that. I know especially UCCS College of Business has a lot of arrangements like that. Bill, I know you were hired under one of those arrangements, right? So with some hybrid working conditions. So yeah, I think it's here to stay to some extent.
Yeah, and I also think if we have, it's another thing that workers are bargaining with their employees.
Right, I was just going to say
over.
Incentivizing people to come here if there's some kind of...
Yeah, so that's another, if you're an employer and maybe you can't match the other employer's, the competing employer's wage offer, but you can say, oh, well, I can offer you more flexibility. And workers, that's definitely something that they're looking for. So yeah, I think it's here to stay, but the amount of bargaining power that workers have depends a little bit on the state of the economy, right? So if we have an economic downturn, then workers don't have as much bargaining power. But when labor markets are tight, they're in a position to say, hey, if you need my services, you got to give me flexibility.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Joe and I did an interview a couple of weeks ago talking about are companies more willing to provide the education or the training within the concept of, well, we'll keep you here long term, we're going to give you the skill set you need, pay for that training. Where do you come down on that, Bill? Is that something that seems like a logical, or is it too cost ineffective?
Well, I think we need, people need, additional training. The skills we need are always changing and evolving. So, and I think sometimes companies find that the best way to get a trained workforce is to train the workforce they have. But I think the delicate thing about doing this through companies is that a company can train you and then you can leave. So, so I think that creates a little bit of a risk from the point of view of companies that maybe means that we do less of that than we should.
Maybe last question though. I know you guys all want to get to drinks, so last one.
Okay, we have.
Let's wrap it up. Sorry guys, I didn't mean rude there. But I assume you guys want to head out to the lobby. So.
And I'm going to ask a question that's going to make your eyes glaze over. But I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
How worried should we be about the federal budget deficit moving forward? I mean, do people really grasp the concept of what we're doing now and the impact long term?
I think concerned but not panicked.
Yeah.
First of all, there are times when it is very appropriate and healthy for the government to have a budget deficit. It's not something that is bad all of the time, right? If the government had tried to balance the budget in 2020, that would have made the downturn even worse. But when I was talking about long-term interest rates, one of the potential impacts, if you've got the government borrowing more, is it tends to push up long-term interest rates. And we went through a long period when that wasn't really an issue. From 2008 up through the pandemic, long-term interest rates were low and it wasn't holding back companies from investing. But if we go into a higher rate environment, then I think the effect of government borrowing on long-term interest rates and that then deterring companies from investing, I think that could become a real issue, just kind of like it was in the early 1990s. So the older folks will remember that fiscal policy and the government budget was a huge issue then, and it was an issue because it was seen as pushing up long-term interest rates and reducing business investment.
Okay, anything else?
That's fantastic, Bill. That's a great way to end it. So
all right,
that's a beautiful answer.
Yeah, you need a drink now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh yeah. You can have that mic too.
Oh.
Got your tablet? You're good to go.
Yeah.
Got all sorts of devices now.
Got to grab on it. So thanks for inviting us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll be brief because, as Joe mentioned, I'm between you and drinks, so that's probably a bad position to be in. First, let's thank Joe for everything he has done for the forum the past year. And a warm welcome to Bill for everything he's done so far. And lastly, just a short laundry list, and then we'll save the applause for the end. All of our sponsors, thank you so much for today's event. All of our partners, thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And to our team who helped put this together. And lastly, but not leastly, the Ent Center and their staff for making sure this event was a complete success. Please, oh yeah, clap. Sorry.
Yep.
I'm very mindful of my position and what I'm between. So again, thank you all for coming. I hope you learned a lot. If you, that last question about workforce development, just a selfish plug from the College of Business. If you find yourself in workforce development needs and you would like to work with the College of Business, we are happy to assist you with those. So if you have any ideas, thoughts, how we can help you, your organization, and your people learn and grow, please reach out. We'll be happy to assist you with that. With that, thank you so much for coming. Please enjoy the beverages from our partners, Goat Patch and Distillery 291. Thank you so much.